It is being bold. It is being brilliant. It's being non-apologetic about what we're doing.
You know, we had to leverage those abilities and just to come to the table and execute like never before.
Bring in capable people, coach them, make sure they're connected to the outcome, and let them run.
As a leader and with your team, have to have the will to win.
Connecting more with our humanity and, pausing for a moment to be the human beings that we are.
But with humility, you know that you can leverage that skill set that people have and let them be their best.
This will be a time of innovation.
Hi, and welcome to Courageous Leadership in Times of Global Crisis and Uncertainty, an HMG live virtual briefing covering what matters most to drive a winning agenda and make the future a better place. A warm welcome to today's host, Lead Principal and CEO of HMG Strategy, Hunter Muller.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to the 2020 Greenwich Virtual CIO Executive Leadership Summit. I'm Hunter Muller, Lead Principal at HMG Strategy. My team and I are delighted to be here with you today. And I think we have a world-class program, a world-class agenda lineup, and a world-class experience for you today for the next hour and a half. Please stay to the very end and dial into the brilliance of our lineup and the brilliance of our speakers today. The topic, reimagining the business and the future of work, what you need to know now. So with that, let's get on with the program. A big welcome and thanks to our sponsors, Nutanix and Zscaler and Okta. Truly appreciate it. This program and summit is sponsored and powered by Nutanix. So thank you. And a special thank you to our association partner, Fairfield Westchester SIM. A little context, I'm a chapter member as well and board member. I've had the pleasure to work with the Fairfield Westchester SIM chapter now for over 20 years in different, as a participant, as a partner, as a board member. And let's welcome Jim Panos, the current president of FWSIM and CIO of National Gottesman, please. Jim?
So Central National Gottesman, thank you, Hunter. And as Hunter said, first of all, I want to thank everyone here for joining us. I think we've got a really good agenda, a really interesting agenda and timely agenda for everyone. So I hope that you enjoy the summit. We've been working, Fairfield Westchester SIM has been working with Hunter for many years, as Hunter said. I've been there for the last 12 of them, and I can honestly say that these have been some of our best events, have been planned with HMG Strategy, and we're really, it's really been a great partnership for both of us. Before I go on, I wanted to go on to the next, go on and talk to you a little bit about what SIM is. For those of you that don't know, SIM is the Society for Information Management, and I am specifically associated with the Fairfield Westchester chapter. I'm actually the president of the chapter. As I said, I've been there for 12 years. It's had incredible value to me. It's a wonderful network of very senior IT professionals, usually the heads of IT or their direct reports in a variety of organizations in the area. And I can go to SIM for a variety of things that have certainly helped me in my career, whether it be career advice or product advice or just what other companies are doing, just to share ideas and probably even more importantly through that network, I've actually made a lot of friends and a lot of professional contacts that have been unbelievably valuable to me over that time period. If anyone here would like to learn more about our events and about about all of the things that we do, please come visit our website. It's www.fwsim.org, or send us an email at info@fairfieldwestchestersim@fwsim.com, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have. And maybe you're interested in joining us. We'd love to have you join. So thank you.
Excellent, Jim. Thanks so much. Really appreciate your support and partnership over the years. Good job.
Thank you, Hunter.
Okay, so moving on to the next slide. Look, we've been really on our own digital journey over the past 3 months. I would say that we've really actually implemented our disaster plan as we pivoted and went fully digital and fully virtual over the past 3 months with CIO and CISO virtual summits across North America, including Toronto and London. So really a global footprint. we have our whole podcast series, as well as various webinars with our key partners from the Valley and around North America and out of Israel. So please follow us on social media. We've done spun up some really interesting numbers in the past with the HMG team in the past few months. Some 100,000 views on both LinkedIn, Twitter, and other social media angles. We spent a lot of time and energy to make sure the brand alignment between HMG and SIM is right, and to make sure our thought leaders and practitioners brand gets out on the HMG digital platform, the digital highway. Some million impressions a week off of our thought leadership and research agenda that gets broadcasted 3 times a week. Hopefully you get that research. So again, a full slate of summits that we've been doing the past 3 months. Coming up literally tomorrow is the Detroit CIO Summit, followed next week by UK and Charlotte, and a series of webinars. So please dial in, and more programs to come in the near future. Again, thank you for zooming in. Zoom's our platform of choice and our partner. And let's get on to the program. First up, we have Julia Anderson. Julia, welcome to the program. Julia is a global CIO of Smithfield Foods and been a dear friend of, I think, of mine and the HMG network for some time, and the SIM world, the SIM nation, let's call it. Julia, great to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you so much for having me.
So, man, you've had an amazing career over the years, and just kind of walk us through 1 or 2 or 3 pieces. It's kind of like pivot moments in your career that all of a sudden, one door closed, another door opened, and there was something to do with the network, the power of the network. You were ready, you were prepared, you were leaning in, you were leading courageously, and the next door opened and the next big opportunity unfolded. Anything come to mind as a personal story?
Yeah, so when I was working for Kraft Foods in the Chicagoland area, we were doing a lot of transformation. I worked for a CIO who sponsored me into the RLF program, and I was moving to the New York area, and I'm a Boston RLF graduate with SIM. And as a result of that, I ended up joining the Fairfield Westchester chapter in 2000. And at that time, it was early in my career, just getting into leadership, and the power of the people that I met, the support that I got, really helped me through leading transformations, leading projects, learning so much. So I could never probably repay that. So I'm always trying to continuously learn, continuously go back and speak to RLF chapters and send people to RLF and participate in events. And Hunter, you've been, that's where I met you, and we were on the board together. And you've built such a program here where we have this wonderful network, and I'm seeing old friends. And I wouldn't have been able to make this based on working in Virginia if you hadn't gone viral or virtual, gone virtual and viral. So, for me, that was the day I kind of joined, or the year I joined. And it's really been just a network that I've leaned on ever since, and I've learned so much from.
So, you think about this unprecedented time that we're going through. It's almost like a real world pandemic, business economic experiment, right? When would you ever thought that we'd have a pandemic, we'd shut the US economy down for whatever, 2 months, 3 months, and then we'd push the button to restart. Talk to us about what leading was like for you through this crisis, and what were some of the lessons learned, and where did you really motivate your team and really make an impact and a difference?
Yeah, so overnight, I mean, our world, our industry, our families, everything just got toppled overnight, topsy-turvy. And so, everybody had to really pull together. So for me, I've been in my current role for the past 5 years. And I was really thinking about those folks who maybe started a new role, haven't had a chance to really build those relationships and build that trust with their teams and with their peers, and just how much harder it would have been. So I think, being able to rely both internally on the relationships that have been built, on the team members. And I was going through actually a transformation within my team moving towards really building governance, operations, and execution into separate towers. And so, here we are mid-change, and people are, sort of unsure of what's going on and unsure of their roles. And then we're working from home overnight, and we're supporting the business. So it's really been a whirlwind. We've had, a lot of projects that we've had to jump in and work on, all the same concerns that everybody's been dealing with. So really, I think, keeping the team close, keeping them busy, getting everybody working virtually, depending on, the different tools that we weren't using as much, until all of a sudden we were working from home. That really all came very quick. And the learning was, you have to communicate. You have to communicate to all your employees. You have to communicate to everybody, and you have to keep, everybody engaged.
Julia, it's interesting. What we found in this series over the past 3 months is a whole different language or lexicon unfolded regarding leading courageously, leading empathetically, leading compassionately, leading, of course, servant leadership, leading humbly and with an open heart. What does that kind of context mean for you when you think about your leadership style over the past 3 months?
Yeah, it's really putting yourself in another person's shoes, really understanding where they're coming from, what they've been going through, before worrying about, the work or what's going on. It's really saying, how are you? How are you feeling? How are you doing? How's your family doing? What's been your, experience over the past weeks, months, as this continues on? And so for me, it's really been taking the time to check in and to know where someone's coming from before really, moving on to whatever it is, the business at hand.
Great. When you think about the economy restarting and demand continuing to grow, what have you done to prepare the company to really for increased growth?
Yeah, so we really weren't able to shut down completely. We obviously have some of the folks working from home, but we have been really preparing to continue the operation, to take those learnings, things that have made us more efficient because some of the changes we've had to put into the operation, and really taking some big steps to moving towards even some technology advances, like moving to new communications platforms. We've learned a lot about analytics. It used to be, we're driving to be an analytical company. We really want to use our data to make decisions, but it wasn't always easy to quickly understand what's the information you need to see. And boy, we've learned that. We've learned how to understand what they need to see, how to get it to them quickly. And I think that's something that will stay with us, continue throughout our operation. We've been looking at our planning and our supply and operations planning, looking at low code, no code. We need speed. That's one thing we learned, is we have to move faster, and we have to use data.
When you think about the new work style, what does it look like? Work from home, work remotely, a balance of at the office or not?
Yeah, I just spent this week, with the executives and doing our business planning meetings. And I asked everybody, sort of what they thought about, would we be coming back to the office? Would it look different? And I think we're already to the point where we're so far past where we were, and we're really using a lot more video. We're getting a lot more engagement. People are getting productivity by not doing commutes, that I think we're definitely going to consider alternative work arrangements. I think it's very much, we're a relationship company. So we're going to have to figure out what that means for us. And I'm looking forward to some, additional technologies and people out there who are going to, be bringing us new ways to work. But I do think that it's absolutely not just go back and, it's as it was in January.
Yeah, right. So then what the question is how do you keep that innovation or that high performance thinking going when this really is a marathon? It's not a sprint.
Yeah, so I think that there's going to be times when people will come together, and there'll be times when, you are doing some in-person meetings. I think the video is getting, better and stronger. And I think that innovation is going to be farther and wider spread. So, you mentioned the Valley, you mentioned some of the other areas that you partner with. And I think, the world is continuing to even get smaller, where we will innovate more on video, online, sharing ideas, having teams come together virtually.
When you think of innovation, often the best innovation comes when you resources. Was there some kind of unique innovation that came about with your whole team and your company during this time?
So for us, innovation is it's an ongoing thing. We've been constantly trying to reinvent ourselves. We've been constantly trying to build out data so that we really, from this whole concept of farm to fork, really taking advantage of our vertical integration. And so we've continued. I think where we've really excelled is really, as I was mentioning, around some of the data, some of the reporting, and some of the speed to which we're now sharing data across the various departments within the organization. We've done a good job really knocking down the silos. And innovation comes when you get that diverse group of people together, and everybody's not just worried about their silo, but they're worried about attacking the problem as a whole. So I think we'll continue to drive some of these things that we've started to do forward a lot more quickly.
Thank you, Julia. Give us one final parting why you're so excited to be an IT leader in this amazing time in business, this amazing time in history. Give us some inspiration, some hope. What are you thinking?
Well, I think the most exciting thing about being in IT right now at this time is the technology is getting better and better and better. We're still sometimes trying to solve some of the same problems that we've been trying to solve over the years. But I think at this point in time, we really can disrupt and change a lot of things that are in our industries that are extremely challenging, wasteful, inefficient, because I think people's minds are really open to think about a lot of things right now. So I think the exciting thing about being in IT is being able to drive change and being able to develop careers and attract, amazing talent.
Ladies and gentlemen, Julia Anderson, thanks for coming on the program, Julia. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Hope to see you again soon. Next up, Bill Lapp, Customer Success and Architecture, Global Leader of Zscaler. Bill, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Hunter. Appreciate it.
Hey, you guys have been on quite a tear. I mean, I'm watching the stock and it goes straight up. You guys are right at the center of this whole work from home. Give us a little bit about Zscaler and why you guys matter and are relevant in this unique environment that we're going through.
Yeah, for sure. And, the rising stock price just means that you have rising expectations. So I think it also means that we have a good solution that we've been making a lot of customers successful. Like what Julia was just mentioning, people are working from anywhere. Before we had this big transition where we had a lot of mobile users, but people still came in the office. We had a lot of apps that were moving to the cloud, but we still had a lot of apps in our traditional corporate network. So we always sort of kept doing what we were always doing, just incrementally different. Let me repeat what I did in my own environment, but let me do it up in the cloud. And all of a sudden, I think when COVID came, we all had this big shock. What happens if 100% of people are no longer in the office? How do we access our apps? How do we do business continuity? And our approach has always been, with the way things have evolved, we need to stop thinking about having a private network or what's in the cloud or where are things. We need to start assume that our people can be anywhere and that our applications and data and tools can be anywhere. And you kind of start with that premise, it really just becomes about how do you connect those things no matter where they are. And that's why I think when you have a situation like what we were just faced with, the ability to pivot and either work from home or, where do you want to host your apps? Because I'm sure fashionably it'll be a lot more fashionable probably to insource your apps soon and then it'll be outsourced. You got this like fashion, things come and go. But we really think that we've got the solution that allows you to pivot business-wise and technical to either of those approaches.
Well, it's really fascinating, right? So whole tsunami and this whole global experience that we're going through, the pandemic, it played right into your wheelhouse at Zscaler. It's a really unique play on securing a diversified architecture, right?
Yeah, and I think what happened is, for a lot of companies, we were trying to incrementally change things. I think Julia mentioned this is a big time for us to drive change we haven't been able to do in the past. So take, for example, if you have remote workers coming in over VPN, when we had to go 100% of people working from home, we did sort of a tactical purchase. You know, people went out and bought maybe a little bit more VPN or tried to scale up the internet or tried to manage it in a different way. And so that was, you know, brought us to sort of a stable point now for a lot of customers. But that's not really a long-term solution for this type of model, right? Doing what we did before. And so I think right now a lot of customers are taking a step back to say, okay, if I forget this whole world of everything being inside a corporate network that I own, what does that enable me to do from a business perspective, et cetera? I think it's a lot like a mobile phone. So we used to always have landlines, and landlines were great, and we had them forever with Ma Bell and everything else. But then these things, mobile phones came around, and yeah, at first only a few people had them, and you know, bag phones. But then all of a sudden, when you start to realize that now you can put apps on them, you can do GPS, there's smartphones, there's screens. I mean, you don't see landlines around anymore because they're just not as useful and flexible. And I think that's kind of like what we have done recently is we've come in as sort of the connectivity and the platform for all these different types of communications. You're not just stuck to one type of thing.
So when you think about the future of work, you have a pretty diverse global client set. What are your clients saying? What is the future of work? What's it going to look like?
Yeah, I don't, you know, it's like what Julia said again. I don't think anyone's rushing back in the office. So for the last 2 years, I flew 300,000 miles a year. So it's over 500,000 miles in just 24 months because our clients wanted to see me. They wanted to see us face to face. I don't know how much that's going to happen anymore, right? I think we'll come together for very specific purposes, but I think the rest of it will be a lot more just collaborative video. How do we use these new tools? And that's been a challenge is people, how do you adapt to just constant video calls? How do you adapt, you know, that approach? I will say on the positive side, I think it's been the great equalizer as well, because before you used to have people that were in a location and they would make the decisions, they would hold the meeting. And if you didn't move to corporate HQ, then you couldn't participate or you felt like a second-class citizen. Now, where everyone is virtual or everyone's mobile, it's a great meritocracy. I think people can start to, you know, collaborate and integrate a lot easier on those decision makers because we're all virtual, we're all mobile. And I think it also will free up a lot of talent as well, because you're not going to be just as a Silicon Valley company. I don't need to just hire in Silicon Valley. It doesn't really matter where someone is, as long as they can do the job. And I think that really helps with, you know, sensitive time right now with equality, equal opportunity, et cetera. And I think the ability of like Zscaler to make it where people can work from anywhere and you can access all of your apps no matter where you put them. I think it really changes who, how, and where we start to work, and you're no longer restricted to a physical location.
It's really a virtual world right now, right? Looking for resources around the globe, anytime, 24/7, 365.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if you kind of look at a picture of it, you're moving from my old copper telephone lines, you're moving from, you know, this old hub and spoke network to really this place where the internet becomes the great connector. You just need to be able to do it securely and with business policy. You need to make sure that none of your data is going out and that you can access your private applications. You can work with your partners, because I think that's the other future of work is there's a big part of interconnectedness now. And I can't like have a locked castle connecting to someone else's locked castle to do this. And so I think there will also be a lot more of this B2B connectivity in a fluid manner, like what we do. I mean, today, if you think about it, Zoom is one of the only things that allow us to connect businesses. Everything else is really difficult. And I think that's, again, a place where Zscaler starts to provide that service. In many ways, I think we're kind of like the Zoom of application connectivity, you know, people to apps.
Fascinating stuff. Obviously, a lot of it, happy and customer success stories. Can you name one or two?
Yeah. So, you know, I think there's two good ones. I've never done an enterprise-wide deployment in all my years this fast, but, you know, we had Siemens, who's a big conglomerate, you know, multiple businesses, global. We had to actually roll out 250,000 concurrent users all across the globe, right? Because they had people everywhere of all nationalities, countries, requirements, and scaling up a VPN to make that work wasn't going to happen. And we had to do it over the course of, I believe, 7 or 8 days. We did that. Another similar example would be a bit more in the United States. You know, we have like LA County, the whole LA government, right? So you're talking close to 70,000 people. They've got a couple nice articles online about what they had to do. But you literally have the government going into their buildings to grab their desktop machines and bring them home. But how do they connect? And like the judicial branch, how does the judicial branch connect? How do you deal with a COVID crisis when you can't be in the office to talk to each other? And so that was another one of those where you get the panic call on a Friday. Hey, we have 70,000 people we need to have up and running by Monday. Can you do it? So, it takes a lot of work from the customer, the client, our company to do that. But those are two examples of how digital transformation can literally happen overnight if you're committed and there's a will and there's a way.
Bill, there's always a thread with an HMG event, being grateful and happy or proud that we probably picked the best industry to be in as IT professionals. What do you see the future for the IT professional, the tech leader, the CIO, the CISO in the C-suite in the boardroom?
I think it just comes down to connectivity, right? Because we so long have just been, how am I, I'm either the house of no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that, no, it's against a process, no, it's not secure. And whatever happened to us actually making it so you can do wonderful and great things again, right? So you can use all the stuff you want to use the tools you want to use, but still have corporate controls. And I think that's where an IT professional can go. Now we're in a place where with a lot of the technologies that are coming out is that we can be the great enabler and connector of business and people, and the great protector. So come to find out, where I am right now, there's an active shooter. And so I'm sheltering in place so that I don't get hurt. So Paso Robles, hopefully everyone's safe, but both protecting your people and allowing them to be flexible, I think is what we can provide to culture now.
Hey, one last comment on the culture of Zscaler. What's it like inside, and what's your passion, your culture of passion?
I think the biggest thing we do is you have to love what you do every day. And when you love what you do every day, you have extra energy and you go above and beyond. You think about it when you're going for a ride. You're thinking about it when you're, in the car, wherever it is. And for us, I think it's all around being around smart people and, again, connecting people securely. We believe we're just like there was that trend of moving from hard-coded telephone lines to mobile phones, enabling people that way and changing the world through smartphones. We believe we're doing the same thing for business, and that's pretty exciting. I mean, we're pretty excited to be able to change the industry and world that way.
Hey, Bill, great to have you on the program. Great interview. I love your energy. And Zscaler is a top pick by HMG. Go check them out, folks, to learn more. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Ursuline Foley, board member and strategic advisor, as well as past president and chairman of the FWSIM chapter. Urs, welcome to the program and welcome your panel.
Hi there, Hunter. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm a little bit breathless. I just had to run downstairs to tell my husband to turn off the mixer that he just put on. So bear with me as I catch my breath. That's what working from home is all about. So before we get started, I just want to say that I truly hope that everybody's families and everybody in our audience and panelists, that they're all coping well with the pandemic. At least now the numbers are beginning to look better for us, and there's some shining hope at the end of the tunnel. Let's hope it continues. So with that said, I'm just thrilled and delighted to welcome our panel today. We have some amazing experts from across the industry. So they're from the healthcare industry, from financial services, from entertainment, and also from security. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a moment. And we also have different experts, okay? So what I mean by that is this, is that we have CIOs, we have HR people, we have experts on the future of work, and experts on security. And we're going to get all of their perspectives together in a moment. So as you can tell, I'm still catching my breath. So with that, what I want to do, and I want to start with you, Colette, what I'd like to ask each panelist to do is to introduce themselves just quickly, their role and their firm, and a little bit about their industry, and how their company was impacted very briefly through this pandemic, how they had to pivot. So Colette, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Urs. And I'm glad to be part of such a distinguished panel. So I lead the Enterprise Technology Organization for WWE, and that is a sports entertainment company based in Stamford, Connecticut. And our mission is to put smiles on people's faces. And so to do that, we have a business that's comprised of 3 business segments: media, consumer products, and live events. And as you know, all live events and live event sports were put on pause as a result of the pandemic. So WWE moved from packed arenas to a closed set and at our performance center, which is down in Florida, with no audience. So that was pretty dramatic, and it happened, as you might imagine, very, very quickly. In combination with that, we also had to look at cost cutting. So, a pandemic happens, it's unprecedented. We looked at reducing compensation, reducing operating expenses, reducing talent expenses. And then we were supposed to do construction on a new headquarters in Stamford. We've delayed that construction for the foreseeable future. And then finally, and I guess the most difficult for me, was we had to furlough some amazing employees for a period of time. And we chose to furlough those employees rather than terminate, because our hope is that we're going to bounce right back and be able to bring them back into the family. So as I said, live events was impacted very negatively, but fortunately, our media and our consumer products segments have done pretty well during this pandemic. When there's very little to choose from, we've got the content and we've got the vehicle to deliver that content to our fans.
That's great, Colette. Really dramatic change. It's great that WWE was able to pivot so quickly. We'll come back to you in a little bit and hear more about how that pivot took place and what you're seeing right now. I'm going to turn it over to Matt, and let's hear from Matt from NatWest, and tell us a little bit about NatWest and how it's impacted NatWest's markets and your role and so forth, and give a little bit of insight to your role, Matt, as well.
Great, thanks so much, Urs. So I'm Matt Beasley. I'm the U.S. Head of Learning, Diversity, and Coaching at NatWest Markets, which is located in Stamford, Connecticut as well. We are a financial services institution and really are the investment banking arm of what was the Royal Bank of Scotland and has since been rebranded as NatWest, which is also known as the UK kind of high street retail bank throughout the UK. So what I would say is for NatWest, right, we've been, as many organizations have been impacted by kind of the current events and really forced to innovate by moving, all of our staff, to a remote kind of working platform and having to do that rather quickly, especially considering, the financial services institutions are very highly regulated. So the role that technology has had to play in helping to secure kind of a remote working environment that is, again, up to par and is, appropriate not only for the individual, but obviously for the security of kind of the overall business as well. So, it's been a very interesting time, both from, a technology perspective, but I think more so, and even, a culture perspective, which I'm looking forward to speaking today about.
That's great. So it sounds like, based on, your industry, which is it's viewed more as kind of a necessity industry, that, you're doing well through it, not thriving, not diminishing, but going as usual, pretty much, but with a different work environment.
Right.
Okay. So I'm going to turn it over now to one of our panelists who's on the front lines. So Dan, talk to us a little bit about your role with hospitals. And really, you must have really been impacted, your team, your clients and so forth in New York. They're right in the heart of everything. So Dan, maybe you can introduce yourself for us.
Thanks, Urs. I'm Daniel Barchi. I'm the Chief Information Officer for NewYork-Presbyterian. We're a $9 billion health system in New York City with 10 campuses. We're also the hospital for Columbia University School of Medicine and Weill Cornell School of Medicine. So you're right, Urs. we were on the front lines and continue to be through all of this. It was one of the most challenging things that I've done in my professional career, working through March and April and May of this year. You're right, we had to think of innovative ways to operate. At one point, we had well over 2,000 COVID positive patients in-house across all of our hospitals, and more than 500 patients on ventilators and in our ICUs. And so the challenges we faced in my IT and biomedical engineering teams were what many of our colleagues face nationally. How do we get our finance team to work remotely? How do we get the rest of our back office teams not in their office, but working from home, going from 0 to 60 in just a matter of days? And now we have about 5,000 people working remotely. But at the same time, how do we care for patients in ways that we never have before? So we had to take our operating rooms and actually shut them down and turn them into intensive care units. And my biomedical engineering team was turning the ventilators that we use for anesthesia for patients during surgeries and making them into ventilators that we could use for patients who are in medically induced comas for COVID, and increase our ICU capacity from about 400 beds up to almost 900 beds in just a matter of days. And it was a very intense couple of months, and it forced us to think out of the box and operate in ways that we never had before, make use of tools and communication tools, both for our back office team, but also for our physicians to communicate. We had to set up television studios so we could broadcast messages from our chief operating officer on a daily basis to our 47,000 employees, and in every way just be nimble in ways that we are normally very capable, but just had to respond in ways that we'd never planned before.
Well, I bet, Dan, that there was a lot of working weekends and late nights with being so heavily involved with setting up all the medical equipment there that you mentioned, and so forth. Thank you for all that you and your team has done for all of us and continue to do for all of us. Being on the front lines, it's no easy feat for sure. I'm going to turn it over to Quintin, and I'd like to hear a little bit about from Deloitte's perspective. What's the impact, your role there, and so forth, Quintin?
Great, thanks, Urs, and wonderful to be part of the panel. Thank you for inviting me. So I'm the leader in Deloitte's internal IT services organization, part of the global executive team, technology executive team. As you can imagine, we serve the professional services organization, which in turn then services many industries and many of our clients. And so we see a lot of what's happening in many different ways. Looking at the impact of the COVID-19 on Deloitte itself, as you can imagine, as a professional services organization, we operate remotely. So we do work on client sites. Our professional teams are on client sites. And so working remotely is not something that's unusual. What is unusual, of course, is working remotely from where the clients are. And so that was really one of the big changes. And so part of what we had to do is make sure that we helped our client service teams continue to maintain that higher quality service. They're solving the client's toughest problems on a day-to-day basis. We need to make sure that what we had put in place over the last couple of years remained in place and remained stable. But then also our client service teams are looking at all these new innovative ideas, innovative tools. And so our focus was how to support our client service teams as they began to use those and use them effective and innovative ways with our clients. And so it's been a really interesting time of balancing across multiple different industries, but actually watching the organization and the leadership of the organization respond incredibly well.
I'm sure, Quintin, when we get to the question later on around engaging employees, because your employees service so many different types of industries, like you say, some of them on the front line, some of them, maybe not so critical right now, that I'm sure you've had many challenges in that space. So hold that thought for now, but thank you. So we all know that during this crisis, that while digital has taken off and companies are transforming faster on their digital capabilities than they had planned due to COVID, we've also seen an increase in cyber. And therefore, we thought it was very important for us today to include our sponsor, Okta, here in order to get their perspective. Sam, maybe you can introduce yourself and your company, and what impact has your business seen through this particular pandemic and crisis?
Hey, thanks, Ursuline. Thanks for having me on the panel. Yeah, I'm at Okta. We've been seeing dramatic changes, of course, like everybody else, and people mostly know us from the single sign-on part of our business. But like you mentioned, cybersecurity is a huge part of it as well, because it tends to naturally be that wherever you do your authentication authorization, that's your single remaining control point today for actually managing who gets access to what systems, especially as you're moving to zero trust. So what we saw is really a bifurcation. We had some organizations that were extremely ready. Companies who had a remote workforce, like some of them, like GitLab, have never had any offices. They've been 100% remote from the start. And then other companies were very much traditional infrastructure oriented, like, for example, fund management companies, companies like, the FedEx, for example. FedEx, of course, runs a massive global infrastructure. And what we saw essentially was that the whole forced work from home was unrequested, basically a stress test on your true capacity of your VPNs and your true capacity of your licensing on different systems. But we saw that companies who were not necessarily prepared for this from the structural perspective were able to move very quickly. And we actually run an analysis. We published an annual report on the businesses at work, and we did an update on that on business at work from home to see how all these changes mapped out. And there were some dramatic and some surprising results in that as well.
Sam, is your company, being that you're in the cyberspace, are you seeing an uptick in business due to the increase in cyber?
Yes, we do, absolutely. And it's a driving both from the perspective of what is enabling this new normal and new mode of work, but at the same time, the threat actors are not slowing down at all. This is an unprecedented opportunity for them. So we've also seen a lot of companies change their security posture very rapidly, because all of a sudden you have to deal with a completely new wave of BYOD. You have to change the way you provision your devices. If you relied on any on-premise components of saying, like, your first login must be at the office network. Well, no, it isn't. All those things need to change rapidly. So you need new tooling and a new way of coping on how to create the right policies for the joiners, movers, and leavers when you can't physically touch those devices and systems anymore.
That's great. Colette, I'm going to come back to you. It was very intriguing when you mentioned that WWE had to set up like virtual settings for your wrestling rings. I can't even imagine that, because half the fun of it when I used to look at it myself years ago was looking at the audience expressions. So just give us a little bit of feedback on, like, how is that going and what are the learnings out of that and so forth. Can you speak to that for us?
Sure. So if you think about the Super Bowl, WrestleMania is our Super Bowl. And so we left the office on March 13th, and in early April was WrestleMania. And that was conducted over 2 days, a different format than we typically conduct, without an audience. And it went very well. Our viewership was way up. And because people could connect to it via our subscription service, through our television partnerships. So there were ways for our fan base to connect. And I think at the time, we're not saving lives, but perhaps we're helping people cope. So that was one thing. The other thing we've had to do is we've taken our matches, many of them are taking place in our performance center. So as I said, no audience, but what we're trying to do is create more of a cinematic experience. So with our Money in the Bank, which followed, we did ladder matches using our performance center in Orlando, coupled with our HQ facility. And it created a very dynamic experience and very, very creative. So bottom line, it's been all about creativity. And as we go through this crisis over a longer period of time, we need to be thinking very, very creatively, because the energy that you get as a performer, a superstar, you get that from the audience, from the fans. And when you don't have fans in there kind of, fighting for you, supporting you, doesn't have as much energy. So we recognize that, and we're finding ways to bring in talent in very, very close, closely monitored. We're trying to look at how do we stage things differently to keep people safe. But it has been a challenge, but one that I think we've come on, and tried to be very, very creative in solving.
Okay, thank you. I must take a look at one while you're in this mode. So coming back to yourself, Dan, there, with the healthcare now accelerating its innovation and telemed becoming very popular overnight, do you see that with this, this dramatic change, that there will be certain techniques in medical science and in hospitals, especially where you're servicing, that will not continue, and some that will absolutely continue at even, a bigger pace than before? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure, Urs. I'm intrigued by the idea of not continuing, and I have to think about that for a minute. On the telemedicine and what's ramping up, that is certainly an area which the COVID crisis proved the value of telemedicine. We were an early leader nationally in telemedicine by doing 100,000, then 500,000 visits over the past couple of years a year. And in January and February of this year, we were doing on the order of 1,000, 1,500 telemedicine visits a day routinely. When this happened, we jumped up many, many times to the point where in a week we do anywhere between 20 and 30,000 telemedicine visits across the enterprise. And for a while, telemedicine visits were making up 50 to 60% of all of our visits. Just last week, we did about 60,000 visits, about 40,000 in person and 20,000 telemedicine. We expect that we'll continue to grow telemedicine, but I think it's going to get much more nuanced. When you couldn't see your doctor, and telemedicine was the only way to do it because of the inability to have offices and practices and hospitals seeing patients for anything other than emergencies, physicians were incredibly resourceful and found ways to take care of patients, get them the medicine and therapies and other care that they needed. But as we've started to be able to open our practices again, we've been more thoughtful about what makes a good telemedicine visit and what doesn't. And it's required us to operate and think in different ways, both about what's good for the patient, what's good for the physician, what leads to the right level of care. So we've had to get very, very nuanced in the analytics that we've used. And I would say that's an area that's also grown our ability to do predictive modeling about patients, about how the resurgence of COVID might affect us, and plan for the number of ICUs that we'll need, has all been tied directly to our operations in a way that we just never done before.
Thank you, Dan, for that. So you already mentioned there that, that you're seeing an increase, obviously, in analytics, predictive modeling, telemed, and so forth. Just for the other panelists, are there other technologies that your companies are investing in right now due to the pandemic that you really hadn't, focused heavily on before? Was there any surprises coming out of this? Maybe Colette, do you want to talk to that?
Well, I wouldn't say, definitely we're looking at the reentry and the technologies associated with the reentry. How do you do that? How do you safely bring back employees? How do you bring back fans? All of that. So that I'll just park on the side. As far as the technologies that we're really making investments in, I wouldn't say that it's different than we had planned, but I would say that it's maybe sooner and more aggressively. So all around cybersecurity, earlier we talked about VPN and everyone having to go from 0 to 90 in a matter of a day, and making sure that your VPN environment stood the test of time over time. So things like that, I would say we've really made an investment in. Also, Julia was mentioning low code, no code in her upcoming comments. We're doing the same types of things where we're saying, we need to move, we need to be nimble, we need to address the needs of the business, we need them to be able to get the data that they need. It shouldn't all be even through a data analytics function in every case. In some cases, people can, be consumers of the data. In other cases, our data analytics and data engineering teams are definitely looking at data like everybody else, trying to decide, where are we, how are we doing? But I would say it's more of a quicker, quicker focus on operational excellence and then going from there.
Right. So I heard you mention also an important point there, and I believe Julia did mention it as well, is that it's not just about the analytics, it's about the data, the quality of the data, the accessibility of the data, and so forth. So with this move to the catalyst being pandemic, increasing the adoption of digital, it also raises the priority on data, cyber analytics, and telemed and a few other technologies. So that's good to know. I think table stakes is probably the given, right, for the video and the bandwidth and the mobility and stuff like that anymore. So that's good. So as we all know, as professionals, you know, in order to do transformation, it's not just about the technology, it's about the processes and it's about the people. And when we spoke as a panelist group, we want to talk a little bit about now the impact to the people. With so many people now working virtually, with some of them basically having to be physically on the front line, some of them working virtually, and now some companies getting ready to bring back their workforces to the office in stages, okay? Let's talk a little bit about, you know, what that means from a people perspective. So I'm going to swing over to yourself, Quintin, there. As the leader of technology at Deloitte and servicing so many different clients, what inspirations can you share with us today on how to make employees feel safer, more comfortable, and also to be effective and really to like re-win their trust? And I think when we talk about this, panelists, I want us to think not just about the impact of the pandemic, but we also have, you know, as a result of that, well, you know, to some degree, to the side of it, you know, these recent society changes that, you know, are causing a lot of demonstrators and so forth. And that's something that as leaders, we also have to be sensitive to. So Quintin, you want to take it up there and just talk a little bit about how do we really, really re-win the trust of our employees again?
Well, thank you, Ursuline. Let me start with the societal situation. And I think it's touched us all in small and large ways for sure. And no doubt, all the organizations represented here are really leaning into it and figuring out what they can do as an organization. I want to turn it a little bit from a personal perspective on how I've responded, because I think that's the important part. If we look at our employees, how do we actually help them? So one of the things, certainly with the recent situation, it's very important to acknowledge that and openly talk about it. You'd hear I'm a South African, and clearly the events of the recent past have strung a real note with me in terms of the struggle and the difficulties we had in South Africa to move from apartheid era to a much more balanced era. And so that I think is the key thing. First is the acknowledging and spending time and thinking about that with your people. The next area is the whole area about being an ally. And how can we be an ally? Each of us have a position. We're in a position. We're often leaders in the IT space. How can we be an ally and how can we support? And then the other key area from my perspective is how do we outreach? How do we reach out? And how do we lean into making sure that our people are okay? We've got to recognize that our African-American colleagues are having a whole nother layer of difficulty right now. All of us are fighting with COVID. All of us are fighting with a different environment. And laid on top of this, our African-American colleagues are then loaded with an extra load. And just recognizing that, being humble, being honest, being sensitive to that, from my perspective, is really key. So some ideas, hopefully those will help from that perspective.
So being humble and being honest and being open, I guess, as well. Humble and honesty are probably really, really, and, you know, just being sensitive overall. Is there, Matt, is there anything you want to add there? Because you're the HR person there that I know is leading diversity as well in all of this. So you also have both issues on your horizon at NatWest. But first and foremost, like, how do you re-win the engagement and the trust, you know, as you bring people back to work, or maybe there's some employees that might not want to come back to the office, and then maybe second, the diversity aspect?
Yeah, so I think, you know, the issues are separate but similar, right? So to kind of echo what Quintin said, right, it's really around what I like to say is, you know, as leaders, we need to kind of tie people in, right? We need to tie them to the organization. And I say tie as also an acronym, right, for kind of transparency, inclusion, and empathy. And Julia spoke about that earlier today. So, you know, for me, when you start thinking about that transparency piece, right, as leaders, we really have to think about, even though we don't have the answers or maybe we don't know what to say, it's better to acknowledge than not say anything at all, right? So I think that T of transparency is key. And then when you think about the inclusion aspect, right, or the individual, again, kind of having that awareness, you know, whether it's the pandemic, and I think the pandemic has been a catalyst to really raise awareness of what colleagues are experiencing, but also what are their needs, right, from a well-being perspective, and including their voices into the conversation to ensure we kind of can connect and build a culture that's representative of the organization. So that's all voices. And I think that means, you know, when I look at it with my D&I kind of lens on, you know, where do we have, and I'm going to say something provocative, right? Where do we have a knee on the neck of our own processes and procedures and the assent of individuals through the organization? So that to me is very important. You know, and then I think the last piece is around empathy, right? The Center of Creative Leadership has a ton of, you know, information that I've read about just in terms of, you know, empathy equals job satisfaction, but it also, you know, helps to create a culture of trust. And I think that is absolutely critical, you know, as we kind of navigate these waters, right? So not, you know, let's not mistake empathy with sympathy, but empathy being the capacity and the ability to really, you know, perceive and in some ways relate, you know, our thoughts, emotions, and experiences of others to our own. And again, I think that is critical to help kind of, again, architect a work environment that helps people, you know, be successful and you know, ascend, right? I always say that's the key there, is the ascent. You know, so again, it's opening those pipes, if you will, in the organization to make sure, whether it's recruiting, whether it's promotion, whether it's opportunity to policies or, you know, advancement, whatever it may be, even technology, right? Even technology, the opportunity to work from home, given your current environment and experience. So to me, I think it's about tying people, right? Transparency, inclusion, and empathy.
So those are great responses, Matt. Do you find it ironic that, you know, during the pandemic, working virtually, that I've heard a lot of people say that they've heard more, they've gotten more information, personal information from their bosses, you know, getting to know each other more personally. Like people have shared videos of their dogs, and their children, and their husbands, and their wives, and what have you. But here we are working in a virtual environment, and you hear people saying, well, it's getting a little jaded, right? And we all want to get back to the office a little bit. But by the same token, when we're in the office setting, we haven't really been as human in the past. So how do we bring that human factor back to the office, you know, when some companies are going to be working maybe hybrid or fully physical again? Or how do we basically not lose that? Or are there any hints and tips you can give us? Or is there anybody doing anything, that any of our other panelists that are doing things, you know, in order to preserve that human sensitivity piece?
Look, you know, I'll touch on this, right? At NatWest Markets, you know, one of the things that, you know, my team had launched was really a coaching practice, which in the spirit of inclusion wasn't just for executives, it's open to all, right? And I think that's key, because I think that has helped to, again, build a culture of authenticity, right? So it's allowed for conversations within the organization around things that people are maybe experiencing, whether they're within the workplace setting or outside the workplace setting. And we've seen that really resonate through the organization. I mean, that has been, you know, transitioned to a virtual kind of coaching environment, right? Where, you know, individuals are coaching, you know, via Zoom and being coached. And so I do think that there is this level of authenticity that needs to be woven into the overall kind of, you know, not only narrative, but actual practice of the organization, which then ties very nicely back to the kind of the inclusion piece, as well as, look, even in our learning curriculum, which, you know, for me, I'm responsible for, we talk a lot about the mindsets and heart sets that people need. So I don't think there's one answer to this, but rather we need to create kind of a red thread, if you will, that can be woven through the organization to help people be authentic. And I think that means different things to different organizations depending upon how they're structured, who they're serving, and the communities in which they're involved. I don't know if others have thoughts.
Dan, I see Dan and Sam. I'll come to you in a second, Sam. Dan, do you want to jump in on this one?
Sure. Well, I think we're at an important point in our country's history where we have to acknowledge that everybody needs to be treated equally. And I'm really fortunate to work at New York-Presbyterian in an environment with strong leadership from our CEO and COO that are actively working to not just be appropriate, but to be anti-racist, because it's our people who actually provide the care. It's the doctors and nurses across Columbia and Weill Cornell and New York-Presbyterian. And we work together. And I appreciate that perhaps in a remote work environment, we're starting to share more about our families or pictures, but I think it's the real conversations that we've started to have which are helpful. And we have a long way to go. I've had a couple of very real conversations with colleagues and members of my team that I would have never had just a couple weeks before. And I think that there is, of course, the initial foray into being more open and talking about these important issues, but I think it's the real work ahead together and being brutally honest and transparent about what is or isn't happening for all different parts of society. And that's the conversation we need to keep having if we're really going to take this horrific event and turn it into a long-term positive. We can't let society or the media or anybody declare victory or say, this is so great, after days or weeks or even months. This is a long-term journey in front of us.
Absolutely. Sam, is there anything you wanted to add to that? Because I saw you nodding your head, or do you feel we've hit it on the head there enough? Or
Yeah, what Daniel was saying, it resonates, and I feel fairly unqualified in making comments, having although I'm an immigrant, I feel like I've lived my life at the lowest difficulty setting, you know, compared to everybody else, you know, that we're talking about here. But there's one thing that I wanted to mention that was kind of like that connectedness. I feel more connected to my colleagues in many ways than I did back in the office. We had obviously a few thousand employees, so it was a pretty spread out team, and some of them were remote. The big shift that we've seen is now that everybody's remote. It was mentioned earlier, I believe by Bill, that now everybody's on the same page and everybody's on the same level of attention. It's already caused us to change our mind that even if we have office reopenings happening in the future, any large meetings that are about interaction will be virtual only, so that the room cannot dominate the remote people. And as somebody who used to work fully remote role before, and then being in a headquarter role, I was keenly aware of that, but it was a difficult thing to change. That's forced the change for us now.
That's great. Quintin, I'm going to come back to you to understand a little bit about, based on this change that we're going through and the need for more sensitivity and humanity due to the pandemic and everything else, what do you think are going to be the top A, technical skills maybe, as well as B, soft skills that managers and leaders are going to be looking to hire going forward? They're probably going to give more preference to.
I think that's a really important question, because I do believe that the pandemic has caused an inflection point. We crossed an inflection point. We're going to need to be thinking differently. So I do think from a soft skills perspective, a lot of it is going to be focused on how do we show this greater empathy. I think that's going to be a critical one. I do think, and we've been hearing from a number of people, the leadership style is also fundamentally different. We've got to be focusing on leaders that are servant leaders, but also leaders that are inspirations. We need leaders who are able to help the organization find its purpose and lead with purpose, and drive the organization forward from that perspective. A lot of our multi-generational workforce is looking for a real purpose and something that's solid. And I think that in some ways the whole pandemic has forced us to rethink some very foundational things in our lives. And so people are saying, right, so now how does this play into it? So it's leaders with purpose, leaders with inspiration, servant leaders who are able to listen and respond incredibly well. That to me is going to be very much the leader of the future. I look at the skills that are coming about. I do think that we're starting to see quite a quick acceleration in a number of areas, things like AI, machine learning, and others. And so a lot of that, we've heard a couple of comments around low code, no code, and others. I do think that there's now a shift in some way to be focusing more on creativity, focusing on much more around what I'd call the artistic side of things. So moving from our logical left brain to people who are much more right-brained, artistic, creative, which I think opens up. And going back to what Max's comment about diversity, really opens up a very different workforce that is much more complex and much more complete than perhaps we've had in IT in past times. So there's some ideas.
Those are great ideas. I'm just going to come back and dig a little bit on the purposeful focus. I think a lot of leaders might say, well, they thought that they had a purpose too for many, many decades prior to this. So do you think that maybe the new focus on being, having a purpose is the leader that's going to make the tough decisions? In other words, don't do things that are not necessary, like really focus on the priority, because that's probably something that's happened in this pandemic. I mean, is any perspective there?
Absolutely. And it's interesting, this whole thinking about purpose is driving down deep into our value system. So not just a purpose of making a profit, but really a purpose on how do we as an organization impact our society. We talk about the societal organization, a societal enterprise, who's much more focused on not just profit, but also how we're impacting the community around us. So absolutely, I see that as a critical part of the thinking of how do we actually bring that into our mindset as well. So purpose is the underlying, the value system. And we've got in Deloitte a wonderful leader who's driven the purpose literally down to a couple of words and making an impact that matters. And then impacting not just our people, but our community, our clients. And that really drives a lot of the thinking. And so it's that purpose-driven organization, I think, that we're starting to see really come out as something that's really powerful. And that's where the leaders will fit in my mind.
Hey, Hunter here. Great job. We got to jump in. Time's
Absolutely.
up.
Absolutely.
Perhaps one of the best facilitated panels in the virtual world for us ever. Thanks, Urs. Great.
You're welcome, Hunter. Thank you, panelists, for sharing your thoughts.
Sam, thank you. Matt and Daniel, thank you so much. Great job, guys. Hey, we have a poll that we want to put up here. Nikki, you want to put the poll up? Can we do that real quick? And hopefully, folks, you see this. How have your priorities changed since the pandemic? And if you want to select the ones that apply, I guess you could actually do multiple, all that apply. And we'll have some results here in a moment. I really want to thank Sami and Okta. Okta has been a great friend and partner of HMG's for over a decade now. We've watched the company innovate and evolve, and it really is an amazing company. Check out Okta and the amazing service offerings that they have. Okay, next up is Sebastian Goodwin, VP of Cybersecurity at Nutanix. Sebastian, welcome to the program. Nikki, can we take the poll down and pull it? We'll give the results between Sebastian. Oh, here they are. Sorry about that. Okay, so greater focus on growing and reimagining the business, 50%, 54% applying greater resources to support the work from home. And of course, always the cost reduction idea. Thanks, Nikki. Sebastian, welcome to the program.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Sebastian, you have a really amazing background in tech, in cyber, from the Valley. Can you give a little bit of a professional CV kind of background on the amazing experience?
Sure. I started my career in security, I would say back in high school, actually, when a computer teacher kind of challenged us to hack into their systems, and then soon regretted doing that. And since then, I've been in consulting for many years, and then as a CISO, then on the product side of things at Palo Alto Networks in the product marketing role, and now leading cybersecurity for Nutanix And you'll hear it here first, hot off the press is, I'm also responsible for our end user compute for our 7,000 employees who are working from home right now. So that's as of this week, that's a new responsibility on my plate as well.
Well, you have an amazing team, and you work closely with a good friend of HMG's, Wendy Pfeiffer.
Yes, and I've known Wendy for well over a decade. We've worked together in a few different companies, actually.
Why is that role so important, the CIO, CISO role, to work closely together as companies innovate infrastructure, companies innovate in the line of business, and companies want to innovate on the edge?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that's tremendously important to have a lot of trust between the CISO and the CIO. And to be honest, I don't know if I would have taken a CISO role reporting to a CIO in any company unless it was someone who I knew, like Wendy, because that's really important. There's a constant sort of friction between, and it's a natural friction between ease of use and convenience of new technologies and innovations and security. And as a good security leader, you don't want to be the one who's always saying no. You want to enable things, but nevertheless, there are new things that a CIO might want to get out into the hands of users quickly that a CISO might have to say, well, hold on, slow it down here. We need to do this securely, especially now when we're making this rapid shift with the COVID situation.
So we have a big diverse audience of CIOs and tech leaders. What would you say a CIO should look for in their next CISO? What matters now?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I think that today CISOs, it's even more important that you choose CISOs who are not that, kind of a police force kind of CISO who wants to say, no, you can't do that. These are the rules. And that's that. You need someone who's going to say, this is how we can enable innovation securely, and this is how we can move very quickly. There's that natural friction. And I think what Wendy found a great way to kind of break down that natural friction very quickly, right? She said, well, you've got end user compute and you've got security now. So if you're going to have that conflict between enabling people with the best tools on their laptops at home and securing them, that conflict's going to be all yours now. So that's what I'm dealing with.
That's a pretty unique build right on the role of a CISO. I hadn't heard that one recently.
Me either.
What are the challenges for you in effectively operating in that role?
The challenge is finding the balance and making sure, first and foremost, we need all of our employees to be very productive at home and make this transition very smoothly. And so far, so good. It really has gone fairly smoothly. We use technology like Nutanix Frame, which is a desktop as a service. So people can use any device, no matter where they are. I've got people who are using iPads, but running a full Windows desktop from that iPad. And so that's pretty cool. And we've really come up with the tools and technologies to make it super easy for our employees by meeting them where they are. And what I mean by that is, for example, a lot of our employees use Slack, right? So instead of telling them, well, to get your Frame virtual desktop, you have to go to some tool somewhere and request it or put in a ticket. We say, just ask this bot in Slack, right? And it responds to you immediately and says, well, which region would you like your desktop to be provisioned in? And you choose the region and it says, okay, it's done. So those are the types of delightful, simple interactions that we're trying to create for our employees.
When you think about reimagining business and reimagining the whole future of work, technology professionals in general, they tend to be more left brain, more analytical, not right brain. And we just came up on the last panel, more creativity, more reimagining the customer journey and the whole workflow journey. How can we all be better at reimagining the way we all work together?
Yeah, that's going to be my challenge here. And, as I rethink our whole end user compute strategy, or the future of work for our own workforce, right? And what I do is, go and talk to people who have different backgrounds and experiences, because sitting in a vacuum, coming up with solutions for others is a recipe for failure, I think. So it's really about people who don't have the IT background, who don't really have any concept of what's possible, what tools are out there. I like to speak with those people and talk about how they like to work and what works for them and what doesn't.
Excellent. Sebastian, 3 months ago, everything changed overnight. Everything pivoted. How did you help your organization work from home, and what were you doing at that point?
Yeah, so we made a very rapid transition. Luckily, we're a software company, and we use a lot of our own, we drink our own champagne, as we like to say. So we already had the capabilities for remote work. We just had to scale them to 100% of our workforce very quickly. And luckily, they're very scalable tools, so we're able to do that very quickly. But it was also, it's really a test in resilience of our processes and our operational flows, like in our security operations center, our SOC. We really had to put that to the test, because our SOC, we just built out this brand new, beautiful SOC with all the big screens on the walls where people could sit and see the dashboards, and now we're not there. And at the same time, we have to keep pace with the new security events coming out. And that was put to the test. There was some new vulnerabilities that were announced in some of the software we used just a few weeks ago. And we had to rapidly detect that this new vulnerability and threat was announced in the wild and patch it within 1 day, because 2-3 days later, other companies were saying that they had just been hacked because they didn't respond to it quickly enough. So that's the speed and the pace that we operate in security operations, and you can't miss a beat even when you're making this kind of transition.
Hey, Sebastian, any comments on the increased threat landscape over the past few months?
Yeah, we have seen an increase in threats. A lot of it has been more of the scam kind of threats, emails, claiming some COVID-related thing that they need someone to do. Click here, change this bank account number and send us some money. Our tools block, thankfully, most of those, but the attackers always find ways to circumvent the filters and sneak an email past here and there. So we've been extra vigilant, and we roll out our own. My team runs our own phishing expeditions to our employees for simulation and training purposes. And so we've actually kicked that off with a little more frequency than normal to keep people at a high state of alert and well-trained.
Anything that you can share with us in terms of best practices, lessons learned regarding, on the broader scale, the global scale, nation states and threats on scale that are probably unprecedented?
Yeah, I've heard about certainly an increase in ransomware threats as well, and that especially in the past has been the type of threat that has hit healthcare substantially. So these things can be really concerning, and adversaries launching these types of attacks now in the midst of this current crisis is worrying. So, the lessons learned and things that my team do to prepare, we run a lot of our critical workloads, of course, on Nutanix technology, and we have something called WORM, right? Write once, read many, right? So some of our more critical things like my security logging capabilities and everything, we put on that drive, that type of storage using Nutanix objects, which means that that you can't write on it anymore. So if ransomware were to attack, it can't affect that bucket of storage. So these are the types of techniques that you can do to kind of prepare yourself for the worst case scenario if something like that hits.
So what kind of a communication style do you have up over to Wendy or up to the C-suite? What's your kind of desired state there, and how do you coach other CISOs that you might be working with on the outside as clients?
Yeah, good question. And I do coach a lot of CISOs, because actually just last night I was teaching in the course I teach at UC Berkeley on managing cyber risk, where we have a bunch of CISOs, and we talk about just this topic. And really, I think that what I advise is tying back to the business objectives, right? All the executives don't necessarily want to have conversation after conversation about cyber risks and cyber threats. We want to talk about what are we trying to do as a company? What are our business goals? And then what are cyber risks and threats that might stop us from achieving those business goals? And then we can start the conversation from there. Risk to future revenue, risk to future business objectives, not just cyber risks and threats in a vacuum.
So I got to kind of close on the classic question, Sebastian. What keeps you up at night? What wakes you up?
Lately it's this week it's thinking about how I'm going to both define the strategy for the future of work and end user computing for our 7,000 people, and balance that with my role to also secure the environment and run our security operations at scale. So there's a balance to achieve there, and that's what will be keeping me up for the next several months, I think.
Excellent. You know what? Nutanix is one of the more interesting stories in the past few years out of the Valley. An incredible trajectory, right? What's unique about what Nutanix does from a technical point of view in the infrastructure stack, and what's unique about the culture?
Yeah, what's unique about what we do from a technology perspective is that we're really a multi-cloud, hybrid cloud operating system. And what that means is that, for your on-prem stuff, we have our own hypervisor that you can use to run all your VMs on-prem, but then you can use the same management console to run your workloads in different clouds, make things portable so you're not locked into running something in one cloud or just on-prem or what have you. And then, we have a full suite of other solutions and storage and desktop as a service and security, right? We have micro-segmentation built in to the virtualized environment as well. And so, having all that cool technology at our disposal makes my team very happy when we have to rapidly make shifts like we just did, and also when we have to scale out our security operations on our virtual platform.
And the culture?
Yeah, culture. One thing I was struck by when I joined Nutanix was just the collaborative culture. As a CISO in a lot of companies, we have to deal with a lot of folks who don't want to deal with the security and compliance stuff and following policies. But our culture is very open. People want to do the right thing, which is what I love. So we get to spend less time, arguing about doing the right thing and more time just figuring out how to be the best at what we do. So that's what I love about the culture.
Sebastian, great to have you on the program today. Thanks so much for being here. Brilliant thought leadership. Please check out Nutanix. They really have an interesting offering. It's an amazing company, and you can reach out to Sebastian or others at the Nutanix organization to learn more. We'll see you soon, Sebastian. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Hunter. Bye.
Cheers. Next up, Kirsten Wolberg, Chief Technology and Operation Officer of DocuSign. Kirsten's a HMG CIO of the Year award recipient, as well as a rock star and a great friend for many years. Kirsten, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Good to see you.
Yeah, and it's fun because now that we're doing it in this virtual way, I definitely would not be part of this forum if we were doing this in person, because I'm on the West Coast in San Francisco.
Correct. Likely we would have been in the Valley or in San Francisco. So, wow, what a pleasure. And how exciting to have you on the program. I mean, I think everyone who's on the program today, probably within the last 5 days, has done a DocuSign. I did one just 10 minutes ago. Nice new contract that came in. So thank you very much for all the service and value. You all simplified the whole paperless, right, touchless process of securing contracts.
Yeah, and thank you for being a customer.
Of course. So what a wild ride you guys have been on. This is another Silicon Valley amazing story. Tell us a little bit about the journey and your role at DocuSign.
Yeah, so I joined DocuSign about just over 2.5 years ago, 6 months prior to our IPO. And Tom Gonzer, who's one of our founders, he always laughs and says, we're the greatest overnight success story that actually took over, it was 10 years, looked like we were in a coma. And then all of a sudden things were up and to the right as we got nearer to our IPO, and certainly post IPO, which was in April of 2018. And so my role at DocuSign, I lead technology and operations. So your traditional and typical IT functions, security, I've got privacy, compliance, data warehouse, and a whole bunch of other things as well. So essentially everything except R&D within the technology and operations space is in my world.
Fascinating stuff. When you think about the title of our conference, Reimagining the Business and the Way We Do Work, what's on your mind?
So certainly our mission at DocuSign is to make the world more agreeable. And everyone knows us as a e-signature company, and that's what most people's interactions at this point have been. And what we have been focused on is moving from this e-signature space and looking at the entire end-to-end agreement. So if you look at the business processes associated with agreements, you're preparing those agreements, you're signing the agreements, you're acting on what's actually the content, what are the tenets in that agreement, and then you're also managing or analyzing the agreements after the fact. So we now have a product line that extends across the entire end-to-end of that system of agreement. And we, May 1st, we announced the acquisition of Seal Software. That's a company that really is in the analysis and manage space. So my team also runs M&A and M&A integration. So we have been the middle of a pandemic, the middle of, very serious social uprising associated with racial injustice and an acquisition, kind of all there at the same time. So there's been a lot to do for sure.
So, the old axiom that culture eats strategy for lunch.
Yeah.
Lunch. Good. Breakfast, lunch. Okay.
Breakfast, lunch, dinner.
Dinner, right. How do you maintain the company's culture in a remote workforce in the middle of a pandemic and the riots that have been going on around?
Yeah. DocuSign has our core values and I believe it's very different than any company that I have ever worked at. I've been at great companies. I've been at Charles Schwab, I've been at Salesforce, I've been at PayPal, but here at DocuSign, we've got 3 values. 1 is to be more agreeable, 2 is to be loved, and 3 is to be more responsible. And so these words in and of themselves, agreeable, loved, and responsible, to me speak volumes about how different DocuSign is as a company and what our culture is and what we stand for. And we look at those 3 words within the context of our employees, our customers, and the world. So how can we be more agreeable with our employees and our customers and the world? How can we be more responsible? Sort of in the current state, how are we more responsible with our employees? By making sure that we have created the most equitable and inclusive workforce, and are taking actions, not just words, but actions to ensure that we have a workplace where employees can do the work of their lives. How can we be responsible for the communities that we live in and take action? We had a story of a DocuSign employee that was in Seattle who went to help clean up after the riots. And the owner of the restaurant that he was cleaning up came after he got there and asked him, "Who are you? Why are you here? And who sent you?" And he said, "I'm from DocuSign. No one sent me, but I just wanted to help." And so that's the kind of employee that we have at this company. And those are the kinds of actions, those individual actions that collectively stand for who we are and how we want to show up in the world. And
That's the stuff. It sounds like you have an amazing CEO. A little bit about the CEO and how he's created this culture and with love in it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, one of the greatest parts about working at DocuSign, whenever you tell someone you work there, the first words out of their mouth are, "I love DocuSign." You know, it's very few people have the gift of being able to work at a company where that is what the first thing they hear when they say the name of their company. So we call it DocuLove, and we want to make sure we continue to have products and solutions that help our customers continue to love us and have an environment at DocuSign where our employees love to come to work and are doing good things in the environment, saving trees and being very socially conscious.
You've had an amazing career with 4 amazing different companies, including Schwab and Salesforce and PayPal. A little advice for women about designing and navigating your career. Any thoughts there, or for anyone?
The pivot point in my career I found was when I really embraced my authentic self and stopped trying to outman the men. I had grown up in a very male-dominated culture, and I had modeled my behaviors after those who were successful, and those who were successful were men. But when you see male behaviors on a woman, for a while they really worked, and then suddenly that's when women start to get branded with having style issues, being too aggressive, being too this, too that, and not finding the success in their career. So when I realized that I was really wearing the behaviors of a man, and I needed to wear the behaviors of a woman because I am a woman, that's when my career continued to accelerate. Up to that point, I was kind of coming up against a lot of friction, and I was getting a lot of those style point feedback sessions. And so I would say, be your authentic leader and embrace your femininity.
Fascinating stuff. You have the little questionnaire. By the way, thank you for these questions. They're great. You probably get the A+ star of the year, Kirsten. The most prepared questions. We go for an hour here. What impact, if any, does the current pandemic have on college internships and college hiring?
So we had to make a tough decision. Are we going to bring interns into DocuSign given the fact that we are 100% remote? A lot of our peer companies had to say no. And we got together as a team and decided that we weren't sure exactly how we were going to do it, but we were committed to live into the commitments that we had made to the interns and stay true to the offers that we extended. So we have a class of about 70, I believe, college summer interns. They are all working remotely. It's funny because a lot of them they thought they were coming to the Silicon Valley to have this incredible experience, and most of them are living in their childhood bedrooms in the Midwest somewhere. So it's not exactly the experience either one of us anticipated, but we have gone 100% virtual, and everyone is working remotely, and it has been a great experience thus far. And I think that we will learn a lot through this onboarding and through the summer that we will be able to continue to use and potentially open up our college intern program more extensively in the future and not have to bring everybody here into San Francisco.
It's exciting, the possibilities that now we all learn you can be remote around the world and network, right? And be part of a team from Kansas. You can be working for a Silicon Valley company, right?
Exactly.
So, final question, what are the plans to return back to corporate headquarters of the DocuSign offices?
So our plans are not currently definitive in terms of when we're returning back. We are a global company, and we are starting to look at those offices that are in areas where the pandemic is far more under control, Tel Aviv, Sydney, to look to a return to the office sometime in the August timeframe. But for most of our other offices, we are, it's looking like it's not likely until fourth quarter this year at the earliest, but we're following, of course, all of the local laws and regulations and the recommendations of the World Health Organization, et cetera, to make sure we're putting the health and safety of our employees first.
Kirsten, great to have you on the program today. Thank you so much for zooming in and being part of the Greenwich Summit today. It's always good to see you, and hopefully you can be involved when we launch our global Women's Summit here in the next few months.
Excellent. I would be honored. Thank you so much. It's been great.
Super. Thanks again. We can actually, if the folks that are still, speakers that are still here, you can turn your cameras on and come back to the main stage. That'd be great. Urs, final comment, great program. What would you think, Urs, you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, I think that some of the advice today and inspirations from the leaders was phenomenal. You know, being humble, being honest, being much more loving and engaging of people. Just great takeaways from everybody. So thank you for sharing your insights with us all.
Excellent, Urs. Thank you for being an active player in making this all happen and orchestrating it. Great job on the panel. I want to thank all the panelists, the speakers. Great job. Our partners, Zscaler, Nutanix, and Okta. Check out each of them. They're really top tier companies that are making a difference in this work from home environment. Our partners, Fairfield Westchester SIM. It's been a great partnership for 14 years now. Long time. Really, that's it for today. Look towards the summit. Jim reminded me, our October summit we're looking at right now, whether it'll be a hybrid summit where we'll be bringing people in from around the world at the Greenwich Hyatt or completely virtual. More on that to come. Urs, final word?
Thank you, Hunter, for hosting us today. This was fantastic. Thank you very much.
It was
and thanks
a lot
for your
of fun.
partnership.
Great. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Bye-bye.